Hi, I'm Zendor, and yes, you have been expecting me. I'll be your guide, playing the devil's advocate as we peer into the depths of what keeps us afraid, angry, ignorant, and immobile. You draw your own conclusions. So many times, if you don't stand for something, you'll fall for anything. And in today's world with so much misinformation keeping us apart, it really does matter how we interact with one another.
Namaste and in Lak'ech, and welcome to this episode of One World in a New World. I'm your host, Zen Benefiel, and do please like, share, subscribe. Most of all, comment, ask questions. We will be engaged and we will engage. I guarantee you, and you'll learn something. We'll both learn something from the exchange. So please do that. And also, I invite you to visit planetarycitizens.net, where you can download the free version of Planetary Citizens Awakening the Heart in Humanity. I guarantee you it will invite you to experience life in a whole new way. And by the way, if you've got some Russian friends, there's also a Russian version available. So we are in the process of bridging worlds. So thanks for that. Now, this week's guest is John Mollura. Now, John is an executive coach. He is an international speaker and the founder of Elite Action Academy. Imagine what that might be. He likes to weave through or navigate through the chaos that we're experiencing, eliminating the clutter and finding clarity in the path forward. So this is going to be an amazing apocalyptic chat, and we're going to venture into some deep water, I'm sure. Don't go away. We'll be right back. John, it's such a delight to have you here. I'm looking forward to taking a deep dive into how you've experienced life, what you've found, and the connections therein. So thanks for showing up.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing your time and your audience with me, Zen.
Oh, you're very welcome. And it's a pleasure to be able to talk to brilliant people all over the world and get educated, first of all, and to educate our audience about different perspectives and how those integrate in bridging the inner and outer worlds that we experience today and the relevance that they have in the practical applications of that wisdom in the outer world. So,
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
when did you first begin to recognize that there was more to life than just the cursory physical experience?
Yeah. So I can trace it back, as a lot of people can to a really, really dark moment in my life whenever it really just caused me to question everything. And it was after losing one of my best childhood friends, and I was a new father and had all these stories I was telling him about myself, about what I would be able to do as a father, what I wouldn't be able to do as a father, all the negative stories. And it was a moment of just brokenness after losing my friend.
Sure.
And I didn't know what to do, because up until that point I was in my early 30s at this point, and had been a very high performer all my life. At the time I was leading test operations as a contractor for NASA and the US military for elite units, making sure that whatever we were sending to Mars or putting on a, fighter pilot was going to do what it needed to do before it had to do it in theater.
Oh, sure. And
Yeah.
the tremendous stress, not just in the production side of it, but the safety side,
Yeah.
right? I was in the aerospace industry for a number of years, and the fastidiousness in the detail and the construction, the specifications, meeting
Mhm.
millions of an inch tolerances
Yeah.
in those types of things. Because if you don't, you get a little wobble and then things fall apart.
Yeah. 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 Little wobble tends to turn into a very big deal at 17,000 miles an hour when you're trying to escape Earth, right? And
Absolutely.
yeah, and you have a background in that. I think you said you were in machining,
Yeah.
for the aerospace industry. So you get it. So I'd been doing that job after I graduated college. I was about 8 years into it, new father, and just found myself and I was just so broken and I didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
And up until that point, I had actively pushed away all manner of faith, based on some experiences I had growing up. I wanted nothing to do with it. But in that moment, I just became so broken. I said a prayer. I said the serenity prayer. Give me the wisdom to know the difference. And as soon as I said that, I felt a warm sensation come over my body. And I thought,
Isn't that awesome?
well, at the moment, I thought,
Evidence.
yeah, evidence. Or I thought, well, this is either evidence that, God is real, or maybe I've just finally cracked up completely. So
Well,
jury's
both
still
may
out
be
on that,
true,
but
right?
yeah, right. But that was the moment when my faith was rekindled, and I was able to realize that there is something more than me to this life, and that was probably the
Sure.
turning point in the summer of 2009.
Well, this is interesting. Now, here's where you had a direct experience, which gives you a truth, right? Regardless of theory, books, whatever you've heard,
Mhm.
advice you've gotten, now you have a direct experience of the sensation of that. It's indelible.
Oh, for sure. I can remember it. I have goosebumps right now thinking about it 15 years later.
Good,
Yeah,
good, right? So here's this memory block that's now come up and you're, embraced by it again.
right.
So this is really cool. Now, I've found that these kind of moments are what we bring back into our lives in those moments of distress in order to move forward because we have an experience of what it feels like to be in that place.
Hmm.
Did you find that to be true too?
You mean bringing like forward the empathy and compassion, like, or do you mean the feeling of what it felt like to experience that?
Yes, and
Yes. Yeah. So that moment was a turning point, not just for my rekindling of faith, but it was also, this, as the saying goes, before God can do a lot of work through you, He's got to do a lot of work in you first.
hmm
So the work that
you
was
got to
done
get
in
yourself
me,
out of the way.
yeah, yeah. So the first thing the work that had to be done was the scales had to fall from my eyes and see what a jerk I was, because up until that point, I very low self-confidence, despite having oodles of success that the world said I should have.
Sure.
I never believed it. I, now we talk about imposter syndrome, but back then, 20 years ago,
Well,
we didn't
yeah,
have
it's
that
like, am I
vocabulary.
enough? Am I doing enough?
Yeah,
What needs to be done?
yeah,
How well am I doing it? Am I pleasing everybody around
yeah.
me?
How long
All
until
the
they
kinds
figure
of
out I'm a
things.
fake? Yeah, how
Yeah.
long until they figure out I'm a fake and I'm just winging it here?
Right, right, right.
Yeah, all those
And the truth is
stories.
just the opposite, but we
Right,
don't recognize it.
right. We don't
What did
believe.
you find helped you through that to see the elegance and the brilliance of your own performance?
One of the things I talk about, and I'm getting ready to fly out to do a keynote this weekend, is I talk about the power of trusting your cheerleaders.
That's
The
that internal committee, right? Because sometimes it's not just one voice, it's multiple, and you're getting it
yeah,
from all sides, and it's all designed to assist you.
correct. And the cheerleaders I'm talking about are the external ones too, because
Yeah, those
sometimes you need to
two.
borrow, yeah, sometimes you need to borrow your confidence from someone else.
Yeah,
So if there are people that that you like, that you trust, that are well versed in the world and are truthful with you, why wouldn't we trust them and let them pour into us?
right.
And so when I talk about trusting your cheerleaders, that's what I talk about. You're talking about the internal voices we have,
Well,
which
the
I
both
like.
mirror, right? That's
Yeah.
the reflection. That internal one, it's kind of when you get the external validation,
Hmm.
then it's a lot easier to begin to trust that internal view the critical self, right?
Right.
Because
Right.
ultimately, we just want to love and be loved. And it starts with self-love first, which is eliminating that imposter syndrome and realizing that, yeah, I can do this and I am whole, or at
Yeah.
least close, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
We
As close as
always
we
have
can.
things to work on.
That's right. Yeah. There's always room for improvement, but that inner critic, the irony of that critic that gets so loud and keeps so many people stuck. And like, I had been there.
Yeah. We all have.
Yeah, yeah. The irony of that critic that keeps us stuck is it's designed to keep trying to keep us safe. That's the grand irony of it. It's just when it gets too loud and we don't challenge it, we don't see it for what it is just a point to reflect and think about it.
Do you feel like we
It's not
have to
judgment.
stay protected, or that we go overboard in creating these suits of armor, if you will, around us that we eventually have to peel off?
Yeah, so the critic, like if you look at the way the human mind is, like we're pack animals, so to speak.
Hmm.
Like we can survive on our own, but we're not going to thrive. So we're social creatures by nature.
Ubuntu, right?
Yeah. So if we just go do whatever we want and have no thoughts about how we're showing up and how other people view us, how they're thinking about us, if we just do that, well, we would probably be kicked out of the, back in the day, the village, the clan, the tribe, the group, the kingdom, the whatever it was. If you
Sure.
were put out in the woods by yourself, well, chances were you were going to be dinner for something with fur and big teeth
Yeah.
eventually.
Early stage disruptors, right?
Yeah, yeah. So that critic is a lens to look at things through, saying, "Hey, are we doing things that are going to keep us intact with the group?"
Hmm. Coherence.
Yeah, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's just when it starts to just become so loud and so negative, and now the group, which we're used to having like a small group in front of us, is literally now the world, thanks to the World Wide Web,
Right.
right? We're not designed to handle that amount of comparison.
Are we? Right? Because here's my question. If we're taught to seek the mysteries and we have the capabilities to do so, and according to the Vedas, we actually have the capability of God consciousness, right? That's 15,000-year-old Sanskrit poems that are saying, hey, guys,
Right.
here's what's optional and available. Um, so with that kind of history, or at least indications that we have the capacity, what might it be like if we do connect and understand that we have the ability to process all of this stuff without the stress that happens in our mental perturbations, right?
Hmm.
For instance, one of the ways that it seems most elegant really is an ancient philosophy that comes from the indigenous side of things, the three brain, the gut, the heart, and the head.
Hmm.
Now we know scientifically the gut has neurosensors. It feels everything. We're built on a system made of vibrations. So how would we tune into that? Intuition, gut feeling, right?
Right.
We don't trust it because it's so out of the norm, because we don't have the reflection of that of others, because most of us aren't doing that. Then
Right.
we have the second brain, the heart, which distills it. Is there resonance there? And if not, how do we sift through that? Well, how do we then give that clarity of information to the multidimensional quantum computer sitting on top of our shoulders that has access to everything,
Yeah.
right? That we still limit because we believe that it has limitations. How do we get beyond that? I'm sure that you talk about it, right? What's the process for you, and how can we make that relevant in our lives?
Yeah. One of the things I talk about a lot is the internal navigators we have.
Hmm.
And we a lot of times are just on autopilot, right? Like everything in the modern world is designed to keep us on autopilot.
Sure. And
So
70,000 thoughts a day, most of them are self-deprecating because we think we miss
yeah,
everything.
absolutely. And guess what? There's a whole industry out there designed to make you feel like you're missing everything and
Oh,
you're not
absolutely.
enough. And
Absolutely.
look at what that parent in New Zealand is doing, feeding their kids organic bento boxes from the chicken farm they live on. Like, you know, don't you feel like you're doing it wrong now in Delaware, which is where I'm at, right? So if we're just on autopilot and consuming that content or listening to his points of view and not pausing and be like, what's the truth here?
Yeah.
What's the truth? Let me shift out of autopilot and become aware and continually running things through that filter. That's very powerful in being
But you got
able
to
to
hit the pause button first,
100%.
right?
Yep.
You got to press it, stop, look, and listen.
Right. Yep.
Wow. That's I heard that in the 70s and talking about walking across the street, right?
Right.
Same
Yeah.
thing now.
Yeah. Yeah. Now in modern days, it's stop, collaborate, and listen,
Yeah.
from MC Hammer, the great
Yeah.
theologian. But stopping is something, especially that high performers and the leaders that I work with in coaching, hitting that pause button is not in their vocabulary, because high
Mm,
performers are always off to the next thing, or probably actually 5 steps ahead. And that's
sure.
one of the things I talk
Yeah.
about to begin to trust your leaders is you got to pause and take credit for the amazing things that you've done. Because we
Favorite
don't.
phrase I've heard recently, and actually not so recently, it's been in the last few years, slow down to go fast,
Yeah. Yep. Yep. The
right?
lot. Yeah. Yeah.
And it brings up all the old Eastern stuff, like chop wood, carry water. But
Mm-hmm.
when you're doing something, totally focus on it. Don't allow all the other distractions to enter in. That's
Yep.
a lot of discipline, though. How did you find that?
Well, like everything, it's a muscle that needs to be built. And that's where a lot of people get frustrated so quickly, because humans by nature, we're impatient,
Mhm.
right? Left to our own devices, we're impatient. Look at a child. Patience, not their strong suit. It's something we need to learn.
Right.
So, and especially now with everything is just go, 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 go. Like I can stream any movie ever made on the planet right to this device in a matter of seconds.
Sure.
So patience is something that we are not conditioned for initially. And it's definitely not something that if we're on
Right, and it's
autopilot, yeah,
exacerbated by the rapid fire social media and the scrolling, the few second videos, the
yeah.
attention grabbers, all of this fluff to
Hmm.
try to get attention,
Yeah.
but the intention behind it isn't solid.
A lot of it, no. And if we're just on autopilot, we're just going to think that's the truth and that's the way everything is.
Bunch of shiny objects, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Love the plastic hallways that Hunter S. Thompson talked about, right? And but if we can be aware of that and see it for what it is, we can be like, well, wait a minute, I don't need to do that. Like going back to that chop wood, carry water. What are the basics I need to do?
Mhm.
It's like, be aware of myself, be kind to myself, make sure my cup is filled so I can pour into other people. Because
And
as
what
a
did you find that were things you had to filter out of your cup, right? Or the lid you had to take off of it in order to allow it to be filled. What
yeah,
were the
well,
types of things you ran into?
I've never thought about that. That's a great point. Taking the lid off, because
It's what apocalypse means,
yeah, okay.
right? You unveil hidden knowledge, and it's not so hidden. You just got to ask the right questions to get to it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And there's the key, having that curious posture. And I'd say taking the lid off and allowing others to pour into me, and allowing myself that space to breathe.
Mm.
That was probably step zero that needed to be done, that I was so unwilling to do.
What did you find were your key points of resistance?
We can trace, I can trace all of my stuff back, unfortunately, to traumas I experienced. I didn't have the vocabulary to recognize what it was. So
Mm.
because of those experiences that I had, that I've now come to be able to see and relive and process through healthily,
Yeah, kind of
I now
quantize
see.
them, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Kind of quantize them.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like, oh, okay, that's the reason why I need to feel so self-reliant and didn't trust other people. So once I was able to see that was the reason why, it was like, okay, not everybody gets a seat at the table of my life. We need to have wise guards at the gates of our life for our time, our values, and our energy.
Right.
So, but who do I let in? Because these guards that I have in my time, my values, and my energy, their job isn't to keep everybody out. Their job, like a guard at the gates of a castle, is discernment.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to discern like who's trustworthy, let people in steps, and then start letting them pour into me, people that have made it past the inner realm of guards of my life that I've put up.
Now that's a gem, discernment.
Yes.
How do we discern?
Well, how's the saying go? Good decisions comes from wisdom, and wisdom a lot of times comes from bad decisions. So
School of Hard Knocks, right?
yes, sir. So the school of hard knocks is a good one, but the other thing is what I know to be true is enlisting the help of those guides that are further along the path than you are, or maybe are even coming back down from the mountaintop
Mm-hmm.
to help guide you and build that discernment. And so it comes to, learning from our experiences, and then also enlisting the help of trusted advisors and mentors in our
Sure.
life.
Yeah. Find somebody that's where you want to go, has gotten
Hmm.
there, and ask them how they did it.
Yeah.
And do you find that from that perspective, the curiosity, right, and the vulnerability that you have and willing to admit, I don't know shit, right? I need help.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
Do you find that folks, by and large, are like amazingly willing to assist in any way that they can because oftentimes because you've asked the questions and you show a willingness to learn.
Absolutely. And I do the same with other people. Like someone reached out to me, someone I've known for a while, and they were asking these questions. They said, "Well, you're just probably too busy to even help me with this." And I said, "Hang on a second.
Hmm.
I never said that. Why would you say that?" They're like,
Therein
"Why?"
is one of those filters, right? That's one of
Yeah,
the lids. Oh, you're too
yeah,
busy. I'm not worthy of your time.
yeah, yeah. And I said to someone,
I'm
I said,
not worthy.
"Yeah, right, yeah." And I said to them, I said, "I never said I was too busy. I said, if you have a request, make it. And I will tell you if I'm able to honor it, and if I'm not, what I can do, or if I'm not able to even do anything, I'll at least be able to connect you with someone who can help you. But make the
Sure.
request, make the ask."
Yeah. In meetings and conversations and business dealings, how many questions do you think go unasked because of our resistance to ourselves?
Oh, a tremendous amount. I wouldn't even know how to calculate that, and to just even think about the number of times that either you've had a question and maybe it's gone unspoken, or maybe you were the one to say the question that you had, to be the brave one and take action even though it might have been uncomfortable. How many other times have people said, "Oh my gosh, I am so glad you asked that. I wanted to, but I just couldn't."
Yeah, yeah. I've had that experience. As you know, we talked a little before coming on that my tenure in the aerospace industry, in charge of 7 million a month and 800 part numbers. I had to learn a lot of stuff. And,
Yeah.
however, evidently I had a basic attitude that promoted excellence around me as well because of how I behaved with others.
Mm,
And eventually, I was asked how I did my job because I was always at and above goal every month, despite the fluctuation of others in a 35-person department, right? And all I could say was, it's just how I handle people, interpersonal skills, right? Emotional intelligence wasn't a word then.
right.
What I did, like you mentioned earlier, I was a disruptor in one of our departmental meetings. The floor was opened for suggestions, and I raised nobody said anything. And I'm like, okay, I'm the youngest person in the department. I'm going to risk it. Why not?
Yeah.
And so I suggested, and I framed it, I thought, very professionally in that, we've all gone through the expediting routes. We know how to get around the system. Now we're in a different area with dealing with degreed professionals that expect a different level of behavior, and we need to give that to them.
Mhm.
I was shunned.
Mm,
Eventually went through stuff, got placed on some really tough desks and got them back in order, and then went through a divorce and left the company and had even brought a consultant in during that period at their request. And then it took, I think, maybe 4 years. And it was a year and a half or so after I'd left, and I ran into the purchasing department secretary who said, "Zen, you're never going to believe what just happened." They instituted interpersonal skills classes plant-wide. And I said, great, success. I wasn't
yeah.
there to witness it, It wasn't necessary though, because I
Right.
did what I felt was right in the moment, regardless of the consequences. Now, do you find that taking that stance tremendously risky, right? What other choices do we really have? And then how addressing those kinds of things in your life, how did you do that? What did you find were some of the best methods to bridge those internal and external friction points?
With
And
other,
and one other ancillary question to go along with that, did you notice that the more still you became, the more your questions came out of other people's mouths?
hmm. So as far
That's
as
that's an act of coherence, I think.
yeah, yeah. So as far as like navigating like the internal and external friction, like if we're talking about communication,
Right,
learning the mentality of communication is not for me. Communication is having my message land well with how this person's going to receive it,
right.
and that's one of the things I work with. You know, these brilliant people, and they say like I talked to this person and they got so frustrated with me, and then this person was crying, and I don't know what's wrong with all of them. Why can't they just be like employee number three? And I said, Dude, let's let, let's talk about how they each receive messages.
Right.
And
Communication, problem solving preferences, right?
yeah, exactly. And if we think that everybody's going, we can communicate the same with everyone, we're going to set ourselves up for heartache,
Mm,
right? And I'm not talking about people because then people will be like, what about like a drill instructor? Like they're always yelling at people. I'm like, that psychology is different. They're trying to
right.
break the individual
It's
down.
purposeful.
Yeah, and that's purposeful. They're trying to break the individual down, make them part of a unit. I'm talking
Right.
about outside of that environment. And if we just assume we can talk the same to everybody, our message is not going to land.
Well, do you find that most corporations are a command and control structure, just like the military, and often as harsh?
They're they can be, and that's usually the command and control structure usually comes down whenever you don't have strong leaders.
Mm,
And what I knew to be true, the 15 years I worked in corporate engineering was the path to management was you were a very good engineer. And then they would have that was your reward. You got promoted to management. Well,
right.
guess what? Don't always make great managers. Design engineers, material scientists. Like, just let them be and do their thing. Can they learn it? Kind of, sort of. But a lot of times training wasn't provided. They weren't taught how to
Well,
lead.
and HR was seen as a oh, a cash abyss, right? They weren't. Human resources has never been considered an SBU in
Mm,
itself,
yeah.
and yet it's responsible for everything because it's
Right.
how people are treated that precipitates how the company is going to operate.
Yeah, I was just talking to my buddy Mason, and he was brought in as a consultant, and he was working with the HR department, and he has a calculator that they run because they were having an issue with turnover. That's why they brought him in. How can we, stop turnover? He's like, well, you need to recognize why people are leaving, and then here's the cost associated with it. And it was astronomical, the
Oh
cost
yeah,
associated
because
with it.
what onboarding, as I recall, this was back when I was in the industry, it was like $30,000 just
Mhm.
for the onboarding process. So now you've lost, not only do you spend it, you lost it, and now you got to do it again.
Right, and all the lost productivity.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, as people are coming up to speed, like they're naturally just there's a learning curve, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so learning how to treat people and learning like it's not just some frou-frou woo-woo stuff.
No, it
And
used to be
yeah,
because guys were taught to be stalwart, right?
oh,
Buck
for
up,
sure.
buddy,
Hmm.
right? Just deal with it. Here's the way it
Absolutely.
is. We've always done it this way.
Oh yeah, the nails in all coffins of businesses that haven't been able to evolve. What? Why are we doing it? Well, that's how we've always done it. Tradition.
Exactly. It's
Mm.
funny how um, COVID-19, the Great Reset, and his two questions that really I was left with out of the book. Can businesses be agile enough to survive after COVID?
Mm.
And can individuals be caring enough toward each other to learn how to work together?
Well, capability and willingness and awareness are different things, right?
Another potential bridge, right? Under
Yeah.
construction.
Yeah.
How do you see that construction taking place?
Well, not nearly enough, because
Given.
yeah, one of the most disappointing things coming out of COVID was how fractional everyone has become, and
Hmm.
polarity has been just amplified. And that's one of the things that just really, I mean, still to this day even breaks my heart. I mean, just how polarized things are, and not a lot of people not really having the willingness to have a conversation, which is why the work you're doing is so important,
Thank
to
you.
look at different points of view. Yeah, you're welcome. Because it's not, we don't agree on everything, so now it's not we can't be friends. It's like now we have to hate each other. And that seems to be the mentality that is very pervasive.
Perfect segue into one of the other conversations I had with an ex-studio executive from Hollywood, right?
Mm,
He sat in stakeholder meetings for some of these social media giants. Their ROI is based on how much attention they can steal from you through rage and hate.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's their stakeholder, you
Yeah.
know. So why do we do this? We don't, let's say those of us who, many, who didn't go, COVID gave us a really good opportunity. It was a door opening. We could sit in the sequestration and self-examine, taking that obsession on self-hygiene to its logical conclusion internally, right?
Mm-hmm.
Many didn't because they didn't know how, and they got, just distracted by all the binge watching and free take,
Yeah.
all the
Yeah.
stuff.
And the quiet is scary if you're not used to it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Then when you get comfortable with it, it's like, wow, how come I didn't know about this, right?
Right. Then the noise can become oppressive.
Sure, sure. However, this chaos that was created is a precipitation of change,
Mm,
rapid change. And we needed to do that. So is it possible that perhaps this was orchestrated from a whole different level than we thought it might have been initially? And that it was a wake-up call for us to really begin to figure out how to unify, how to come together, how to mitigate the silos that exist in
hmm.
all the different systems.
Yeah.
Do you
Well,
see that happening?
no, I see it quite the opposite. People are building their own little fiefdoms, and their silos even higher is is
Hmm.
is what I have tended to observe.
Unfortunately, I'm sure that's true. My experience as well. How do you, because I think we're both on the same page in wanting to create a thriving world rather than a constricted one
Yeah.
through these ways. How do you see the potential and or path forward with the kinds of tools and expertise that's necessary in order to facilitate it?
Yeah, this it's a very basic thing. It's not about putting your opinion on social media or writing blogs or anything like that. It's, I always tell people, if you truly want to enact change, what are you doing to the people that are closest to you? How are you treating them? How are you pouring into them? How are you having conversations with the people in your immediate sphere? Because that is how we can really affect change.
Hmm.
Because whose opinion has ever been changed by reading a polar opposite viewpoint online written with vehemence and toxicity and been like, you know what, I'm wrong, that that jackass online is totally right. Who's ever had their opinion
Right.
changed by that, right? No one. But having respectful conversations when you understand how you can communicate your message in a way that's going to land for the person you're talking to
Sure.
and be willing to accept their point of view, that's
Yeah.
how real change can be made.
And when you're conscious enough, you can read that rage-filled post and go, huh, maybe there is something to that I'm
Yeah.
missing. Because we're all emotional. You know, when we get triggered, we just flare up and we don't care,
Yeah.
right? We lose all reasonable logic because we're not driven by logic at that point. We're driven by emotion, how we
Yeah.
feel.
We're like the Incredible Hulk.
Right.
Yeah, when the amygdala kicks in, look out.
Now, what kinds of things have you found that are good to put the animal in its place, to, pet the pet the reptile and put it back in its cage?
Recognizing that when people are lashing out like that, like that's not a true representation of them. Like they wouldn't, a lot of people wouldn't treat another human being face to face or even
Well,
talk
sure.
like this.
Right. We don't want to be treated like that, so why would we treat others that way?
Right.
It's
So
all
when
fear-based, I
I
think.
was just gonna say, when you can see that as a response to fear, well, then your empathy can kick in and then you can filter through the rage. And like you said, let me see if there are some things here I want to be, operative word, curious about.
Hmm.
And let me see what I can discern for myself where some truth is. And maybe there are some things I'm missing.
Sure. But what are the kinds of questions that you found are best to precipitate that inner process?
Well, the first is just being aware. I keep coming back to getting out of that autopilot and becoming aware. And by aware, I mean like the emotions that come up. And by emotions, I always define that as the physical sensations, because our body's always giving us feedback.
Back to the gut,
Yeah,
right?
back to the gut.
So
Yes.
here's a perfect segue to feeling that sense of what we often determine to be anxiety,
Hmm.
the fear-based side of things, or, oh, something's not right here and I got to control it, right?
Right.
Same sensation can also mean here comes some insight.
Hmm.
Here's, something with emerging that you need to be more conscious of and allow rather than be fearful of. Two different ways of handling the same sensation.
Absolutely. That's why when I think it's Simon Sinek, he realized when he would get ready to go speak, he would he would a lot of times be like, "Oh wow, that's a big audience. I'm feeling nervous." And
You're
then the
right.
same thing. He realized, well, wait a minute, it's the same physical sensation, nervousness, as excitement. So he started just saying like, well, maybe I'm just excited. I'm excited. In the very cool Simon Sinek voice, like I'm excited. I'm excited.
Right, right,
And
right.
just and he said it was a game changer for him. But being aware of those physical sensations is key to not let yourself fall down the rabbit hole of
Sure.
rage bait or fear and just being like, oh, my armpits are getting sweaty, my fists are balled up. Let me pause. Let me take a breath. Let me try to see what the truth is here.
Hmm. Now, besides the intellectualization of emotional intelligence, right? Sounds a little oxymoronish, right? How do we integrate? How do we get into our bodies, right?
Mm,
Because we're designed in a way to fit in naturally. We don't have to, a lot of this is where do I fit in, right?
mhm.
How do I fit in? And so we create these facades in order for us to be able to. Well, what about that natural side? How do we tune in to what the body actually can offer?
Yeah, the body is amazing. Like a big part of my job in test engineering was putting sensors all over something, whether we were testing the temperature of the whiz bang thing we were doing, or the pressure, or how strong it
Right.
was. There's no way we could have ever instrumented something as thoroughly as the human body is instrumented.
Sure.
So we need to just start becoming aware of it. And one of my dear friends of many decades went on to become a physician. And I just saw a thing he posted this morning, like to help people learn how to hear from their body. And he
Hmm.
was talking about, write down when you start having that headache, time of day, what did you eat? And he said, do that for 7 days. And then let's have another discussion and give the doctor the data. But it starts with becoming aware of when those headaches start.
Sure.
Does it always start at the end of the day? Well, maybe you've been sitting at your desk like a T-Rex all day, working at your computer. Or maybe you always have a meeting at 3:30 p.m. that stresses you out with the staff. Okay, well, now that gives the doctor, my friend Quincy, some information, and they can move through it. So becoming aware and taking note of it and pausing again of
Sure.
that awareness.
Now, Western ways differ than Eastern ways in that, and because they actually look at the systems in the body, right? And throughout the Eastern cultures, you've got the chakras, the meridians, the datums, all of those
Hmm.
kinds of systems within the nervous system
Yeah.
that are sensory devices.
Hmm.
How do we move beyond this constraint of I can think things through, right? To I can sense things through.
Mm. Yeah. Well, I don't think it's binary, Zen. I think it's you
Are
being
we going
able
to
to
have a
find
trifecta here? That Trinity fractal is everywhere.
well, I think it's more of a homogenization of that feeling and thinking. Like it's not one or the other.
No, it's the order of processing.
Right. Yeah. So that's where it becomes, okay, I have the feeling part. That's your warning system, or that's your detection system.
Right.
Let's lean into that and be curious about that, and then use that information. Let's put it all together
Yeah. Don't be
and
afraid of it.
yeah, don't be afraid of it because
Welcome it because that's what will give you the cues
Mhm.
to move forward in a prudent way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's not feeling it through or thinking it through. It's be aware of what you're feeling.
Right.
It was the Susan Jeffers, feel your feels. Like, like feel your feels because they're giving you information.
And there's all kinds of information, speaking of, about the field, which offers that. And, from, Bruce Lipton, Lynn McTaggart, even Senge, right, talks about the learning organization, self-mastery, and how those two combine. And we've
Mhm.
got all this information. And I find it somewhat like Howard Gardner's work, right, when he came up with multiple intelligences and wrote the studies about it in 1982. I taught high school in the late 90s, and although multiple intelligence were considered, they weren't included in the construction of the classroom. So I built multiple intelligence learning centers just to see if I could, right? And they worked phenomenally well up until that time. There's still really no, I'm not sure, empirical way to
Mm,
understand those. They're more observational, like you're saying. You observe things to figure them out because you're curious as to how things work.
right.
Do you find that or those layers of multiple intelligences and disk assessments and Colby and even Yo Dolphin and Myers-Briggs, all of these kinds of things are different ways of looking at us. How do you find those all fitting together, and are they really significant in creating the cohesion in a work group when they potentially understand each other better because of that?
Absolutely. And one of the things I work a lot with clients is I have them do an Enneagram assessment, which is all
Yeah,
about
there's another
communication.
perfect
Yeah.
one, right? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And whether it's DISC or Myers-Briggs or Enneagram or any of the other things, we need to look at it for what it is. It's a way to just give us a framework to begin recognizing our difference. It's to put
Hmm.
things kind of in order. And there's nothing humans like more than to like figure out like where we fit in.
Right.
Why like the quizzes are that were so popular for so long on social media is like, what kind of bread are you? Are you sourdough or French bread? What Harry Potter, house would you be in? Are you a Hufflepuff or a Gryffindor?
Well,
Like,
and then you got 4 colors too, right?
exactly, yeah. Like, you want to
Notice,
know where we fit in.
yeah,
So they are, but they are very powerful tools, especially with people as they're on the beginning part, especially of this, journey of
well,
recognizing who they
self-assessment is
are.
critical.
Yeah, and who other people are. It gives a framework
Yeah.
because
Non-judgmental. This is the
right.
one thing, and this is what spiral dynamics brings in all the different layers and levels of planetary civilizations and how they behave towards each other. There's no judgment there. This is just an assessment.
Hmm.
It's okay. You're not damaged. You're not broken. You're just unaware.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And
How do you get
it,
that point across?
that people aren't broken, or that there's just, that things just are.
Right, because this is, especially in your work, this is one of the core things you address, right?
Yeah.
Is where's that bridge? How do we find it? How do we construct it? And then how do we walk across it together?
Right. And how can we, in the mindset to have is, how can I use what I've gone through
Mm.
to serve
Story,
myself
right?
and serve others, right? I mean,
Yeah.
that's what it comes down to. How can I make myself as healthy as I can be, spiritually, physically, mentally, so I can have as wonderful experience as I can with his open mind. But then how can, and it's not all about me. It's how can I get myself there and whole, so then I can best serve other people.
Hmm. Servant leadership, right?
Yeah, I mean, servant leadership is almost like saying, like, hey, get me a bucket of wet water. Like, a true leader is a servant,
Yeah,
right? Like, so
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely.
leadership at its heart is
But
about
it's been in
service.
the command and control framework, so now we've had to add servant on the front of
Right.
it,
Yeah.
right, to qualify it a little bit more.
Yeah, and the
Way
command and
how
control, to
humans
come
are.
back to that, is a lot of times that command and control environment that, is so pervasive in corporate America, is because people are made to be leaders that either A, don't have the natural ability, training available to them, or they're not interested in brushing up on their skills.
Right.
So what happens? How do you control people if you don't have strong leadership? Well,
Well, and the control comes from lagging indicators usually,
can you
right?
define that, lagging
The
indicators?
results you've been getting,
Oh,
right?
right.
Your quarterly statements or whatever, right? This is all analyzing the past. And yet the leading indicators are what needs to change in an organization in order for that progression to occur. What do you find that those are?
Yeah, so understanding the health of your team, checking in with your team. That's one of the big things I coach people on is, hey,
Mhm.
have regular meetings with your team. Not to make them feel like you don't trust them, but just to be like, hey, we want to be proactive on stuff. So,
Sure.
like, let's be efficient with our meetings. Like, here's the agenda. We're going to check in on things so we can be aware of what's working well. How can we leverage this even further? Or if there's something that's missing our objective, we're off kilter somewhere. What's going on? How can we, without judgment, how can
Hmm.
we separate the data from the drama,
Right.
figure out what's going on, and correct it?
Do you find that there are tools that help that process now as the development of AI? Um, I'm in the process of working with one, an AI universal engine is what we're calling
Hmm.
it. And it takes that data, human and material, right? And really does an analysis on, runs through 10,000 scenarios to
Mm.
offer best paths. And it's not about reduction in size, right? So the employees aren't threatened. It actually
Hmm.
incorporates how do we keep them, right?
Yeah.
But what changes need to be made in order to facilitate that. And
Yeah.
it gives it from a data-driven perspective, non-emotional. However, from that perspective, then the leadership takes over and guides the ship because
That's
now
right.
you've got a rudder that has a true North Star.
Yes. Yes. Very well said. And you said that the key is the data-driven decisions. So often in business, emotion rules because, well, we're
Mhm.
human, right?
Right.
So again, if we're aware and checking in with our nervous system when it starts spooling up, how do we bring it back down to zero and separate the
Sure.
data from the drama?
Mhm.
What are
Well,
the
that's where
facts? Yeah.
that energy, that sensation in the gut is imperative to pay attention to because it seems in most cases that elicits the fear and constraint of making wrong choices. And so you make them. Right.
Or you don't make any choices, and
Right.
that's then you're just paralyzed.
Sure. Analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah. My a guy I've done some collaborations with, he was a 26-year veteran of the SEAL teams.
Mm,
And that's one of the things they really want their officers to know is how to make decisions under stress. Because he says, when you're on the X, when you're being ambushed, you can't just stand there.
mm.
You got to move. You got to communicate to everybody, and then come up with corrective actions. So
And you got to know it so well that it's instinctual.
exactly. It's like, where am I? Where's the threat, the problem in the
Right.
business world? Where's my team? Let me make sure I know where they are. Okay, that's where we need to go to be safe. Let me communicate it. And let's
So if
let's
these
do it.
guys can do it, why can't we all? Right? Here's the examples of applied disciplinary behavior.
Hmm. Yeah, because they're trained for it, and that's where we fall short so often with putting people in leadership positions. We don't train them like they train the Navy SEAL leadership, right?
Well, we don't,
Yeah.
I found after I taught for a number of years, I wrote a business plan for holistic education because I saw that as being necessary. We
Hmm.
put kids in a box emotionally unprepared and they can't learn if they're not emotionally available. Well, how do you shift that? Well, one of the things I felt that, there's five basic relationships that we have, and you probably recognize this may be new, but I think it'll land well. Um, there's five relationships: body, mind, spirit, planet, cosmos, right? Those are all interwoven, but we don't recognize that until later in lives. And now that we do, why aren't we teaching that to our children or implementing that in situations where they can thrive rather than feel like they're being normalized or tested and ranked and all of that distraction and disintegrating behaviors?
Well, I mean, if you look at the modern education foundation, I mean, it's been around for a little bit more than a century, and it was not designed to build leaders or disruptors or
Factory workers, right?
bingo. Yeah, worker bees. If
Yep.
you want to, if you want to build a doer, you tell them what to do and never let them figure it out themselves. You want to build leaders, you tell them where to get to and say, figure it out, and I'm going to be here to support you.
Right, right. No, and that happens on all levels.
Yeah.
I'm going to jump off the precipice for a little bit and dive into outer space. I had,
Cannonball in.
right. So I've had a lot of weird experiences in my life, as you know, and yet I've been able to be professional and accomplished in those realms too.
Hmm.
So I had a question about the Trinity. Where did it originally come from? Well, I was
Mm.
going through a process, ended up, um, my inner guide shows up, says, "Come, we're traveling across the universe. I have no idea where we're going. I'm trying to figure it out." He said, "Just wait, you'll see." Took 8 minutes to get there. There's a facilitator sitting next to me that the process got hijacked from. And we eventually show up at this three sun system with a dozen planets that are about a hundredth of the size of these three luminous spheres. And I feel like Ellie coming out of the wormhole, tears streaming down my face at the awe that I'm feeling just from seeing this.
Mm.
And then the voice, three is one, came and it says, "We are not only your forefathers, we're also the forefathers of your solar system." talk about curiosity being piqued. I wanted to ask questions, right? My guide says, nope, that's it. You got all you need. You'll figure it out. Exactly what you're talking about, right? And this is where the notion of hydrogen being a conduit for consciousness came from. Because if that's the macro, the micro is the proton, electron, and neutron. The consciousness that forms it's in the space in between. Well, in the periodic table, everything has it is a tertiary model, except hydrogen. That means we're not seeing that tertiary leg and we don't know what it is. And I'll virtually guarantee you that it is that conduit of consciousness that unifies everything that's available to everybody.
Mm,
And this was the basis for the book I just wrote, Coherence from Hydrogen to Humanity.
gotcha.
Now, how does that land?
Well, I think if I think everybody does just need to admit that there is something else out there. You know what I mean? Like I'm not talking about little green or gray,
They're there
beings.
too.
Yeah, right. I
Trust
mean,
me.
statistically speaking, like even if like something's bound to be out there, but
Yeah.
there is something that ties us together. Like it, I know people don't normally call anybody on the phone these days, but think about like you've thought about,
What a change of behavior, huh?
yeah, right. Yeah, now calling someone's rude without texting them first.
Right.
But like even with text, like there's some energy out there, and this is in my ballywick to talk about. But has anyone ever experienced like what Matt's up to? And then bing, or back in the 90s, like the phone would ring and there's Matt.
Right. Right.
Like,
That's the example of
yeah,
interconnectedness and telepathy, for lack of a better.
yeah.
And in that place, there's no boundaries, there's no limits. It's instantaneous. I because of this trip, and it took 8 minutes to get there and 8 minutes to get back, and an astronomical, I'm sure, distance. What could possibly facilitate that, or what speed would you be traveling? And the only thing I could come up with was the speed of thought.
Yeah.
So what is that? The only reference I've been able to find is in the Urantia book, of all things, and it says it's 841 trillion miles per second. And there are those beings in creation that can escort you at that speed.
Mm,
Crazy. Now,
yeah.
until you've experienced it, that sounds like I'm batshit crazy,
Yeah.
right?
Because
I
but
get it.
yeah, and because it's not people's normal experience,
Right.
and then it becomes what's normal for you.
Sure. And there's the direct experience that then becomes your truth that's undeniable, and it doesn't matter whether others accept it or not.
Right. Yeah, it's even more powerful than the statement of perception is reality. It's like, no, this is my reality.
Well, but your perspective controls your perception.
True.
So if
Yeah.
you have a perspective, here's the difference, all right? Do we have a perspective of looking at a chaotic world and wondering how we can navigate or fight our way through it to meet our own needs? Or can we see it from the opposite end of the spectrum as one or in oneness? And where does our individual thread, vibration, if you will, fit into that? And how do we figure it out?
Yeah. 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 It is all about perspective. I mean, one of my favorite hobbies when I was young, and I deemed it professionally for a number of years, was photography.
No.
And when I was getting started, what got me notoriety was just looking at quote unquote normal things from a different point of view,
Sure.
changing the perspective. People are like, how did you see that doorknob like that? I've used that doorknob 100 times.
Yeah. The world doesn't change, your
Yeah,
perspective does.
right.
You see things with new eyes when you shift.
Exactly. Yep. And that's what I experienced in 2009.
No doubt. Um, how do you feel yourself and others to move through these trauma triggers, right? The things that move us into areas of our lives we haven't explored yet that are ultimately beneficial for us to engage.
Well, when they do get the better of me, and that happens,
We're human.
yeah, yeah, we're human. We're not infallible. So
Right.
if we can drop that that thought I have to be perfect, because perfection doesn't exist. The only straight line, truly straight line, is one you draw in your mind.
Hmm.
Otherwise, if you zoom in far enough, that straight line's going to
Or
have some
maybe
wiggle to it.
perfection does exist and we don't realize that it's malleable. And our role in it is, as such, is perfect because we're constantly, we see it as failures. Well, let's switch it to fail forward, right?
Yeah, right.
Lean into it and
Yeah.
recognize that you're harvesting the past to
Hmm.
nurture the future in the present, which is
Absolutely.
precious.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
How do you
And
go through that process in yourself and share that with the audiences that you speak to? Do you lead them through anything like that?
absolutely, I invite them to shift the mindset of perfection, with the definition of perfection being rigid, like
Sure, sure.
no mistakes, flawless
Yeah,
execution, nothing to learn here because we've completely got it perfect. I say we need to shift our mindset. And when I work with first responders, they're like, yeah, but we should strive for perfection because this is literally life or death stuff we deal with.
right.
I said, agreed, but perfection is going to lead you to burnout because it is unachievable. So the mindset I always invite people to have is not one of perfection, but one of excellence, because excellence is doing the absolute best that you can do with the skills, team, resources that you have available, and
Hmm.
having the mindset of this is as good as I could do right now.
Right. And no attachment to outcome from that place.
Right. Let me figure out how
Yeah,
to do better next time.
right. Well, it's fine. We're kind of like tesseracts, right? We throw our intention and visions out in front of us and then gradually pull it into us. I find that's a really, wonderful model to think about how we place our attention, intention, and interaction in order to achieve anything.
Yeah.
How do you feel that this shift that we're in process of from the constrained, the fear-based world and things like that, and the evidence that you see that it's getting worse, right? From chaos comes order. How do you see it transcending or the opportunities that exist for it to?
To transcend past the chaos and the
Hmm.
fear.
Right,
Yeah.
because you'd mentioned earlier that, when asked, do you see these things and do you see it getting better? It's like, not yet. Um,
Yeah.
what are those instances that you're seeing and what are the potential solutions that you feel might be available if they're not already?
I think the first thing we need to do is just call the a lot of the fear that we have, just recognize that we are in a broken world right now,
Hmm.
and then recognize that a lot of the fear is, I'm not going to say manufactured, because there are tragedies and things happening all every day, but they're being
Hmm.
so amplified, and when that's all you see, it can be very easy to believe, well, that's all there is out in the world.
Right. It is
Is
by design too.
Oh, 100%.
I'd like to offer this. I had a conversation with Howard Bloom, one of the world's great minds, and the Lucifer Principle was one of his books.
Mm,
And he did a scientific study of history and how small groups, individuals, and small groups of people manipulated entire populations through telling lies and controlling the media stream, whether it was a town crier or the internet. What's
mhm,
happening today?
right. Yeah, yeah, and, yeah, one of one of the most profound things I ever heard from a Marvel movie, of all places, I think it was like Captain America 2.
Uh-huh.
Like Captain America 1, the premise is the Nazis were, being bad and doing all the things. And Captain America came and genetically modified soldier, blah, blah,
Sure.
blah, blah, blah. Took down
Yeah,
the Nazis.
standard story, right?
Yep. Yeah. That old chestnut. Um, Captain America 2, one of those Nazi scientists lived and said that they were about to win in the present day because their goal was control. And the way they realized, they realized back in the 30s and 40s, they couldn't force people to be controlled. That's why the Third Reich failed.
Mm-hmm.
They said, then we realized we needed to make people so fearful that they were going to be begging to be controlled. And look at what happened now.
COVID.
I mean, everything. I mean, you can look at it as, wanting to go to don't use cash. Cash is old. Cash is a pain. Let's
Right.
all switch to electronic,
Yeah, let's
ones
go
and
crypto.
zeros. Yeah. Well, crypto can be shut off with a switch, right? So if we can be aware that a lot of this is just manufactured control, not to be tinfoil hatty or anything, it's very much just part of the human psyche. And like you said, it's a tried and true method to control people is the
Sure.
media, manufacture fear and amplify it.
Do you ever see it getting to the point where activities, just general activities, participation in life in good ways is rewarded? And almost one of my guests is promoting creditism. And that meaning, you're basically, it's kind of like a UBI, universal basic income for guests or for our audience. And then you earn based on your activity and it's limitless, right?
Mm.
It's just based on your ability to do. Um, do you see something like that? Maybe a better way to handle the navigation of exchange and transactions?
Perhaps. I mean, then you get into what determines the value of that, and by the time you get to that, then it kind of comes down to almost like I could see that evolving or devolving, whichever way you want to
Sure.
look at it, into like a
Well,
capitalism, whereas like a doctor gets paid X amount because of the value they bring, versus someone who does something that is not as specialized gets
mhm.
paid a lower amount. So it would kind of come back to that. But an interesting thing that the doctors I work with are saying some health insurance models are switching to is they pay the doctors up front, like a primary care doctor, and say, okay, you have 100 patients under your care that are part of our plan. Here's your lump sum doctor.
Right.
Every
Based
time,
on historical stats.
well, I think it's not even stats. It's like, okay, you have 100 people. We're going to pay you, I don't know, $8,000 for
Well,
each.
yeah, there's a formula
Yeah.
somewhere.
Oh, yeah. There's a formula. So, but that's not the important part. The shift is the insurance company says, all right, doctor, here's all your money. Every time one of your patients goes to the emergency room, you have to pay us back. So now that doctor is vested in making sure their patients are educated and are being kept healthy, instead of just, okay, nice to see you, Zen. What's wrong? Okay. All right. Everything looks good. It's like, hey,
Yeah.
what's going on?
Or talking to patients that have done their internet research and they come in with identifying all their symptoms and the
Yeah.
causes and the solution and
Yeah.
say, hey, doc, I need this.
Yeah.
And the doc's saying, oh, okay.
Yeah. Instead of having that conversation, that
Right.
curiosity and that awareness, and
Right.
pausing, be like, all right, let's talk about this.
That's why went into medicine to begin with. My uncle was the town GP,
Okay.
and his curiosity, the manner, his bedside manner, his diagnostician capability was just phenomenal because he got to know the people. And of course, in a small town, you don't know them just by the visit. You know about their lives because everybody knows
Right.
everybody, or at least to some
Yeah.
degree,
Hey,
right?
Fred's the one always out playing with blasting caps on Saturday evening, and you're not going to be surprised if he comes in missing a digit,
That
right?
happened to be his name.
Oh, okay. Well, there we go. But yeah, I thought that was a very interesting thing.
Interesting how that slipped through, right? Because I was thinking I didn't use his name on purpose, and then you spoke it.
Yeah.
That to me is just a little tidbit of the evidence of the connection.
Yeah. Yeah. Of all the names I could have picked, I could have said, Frank or
Absolutely.
Sam or Dave. Yeah.
Yeah. Now, is that coincidence? We would think so
Yeah.
in our past, right? Knowing the relevance of energy, significance, synchronicity, even
Hmm.
serendipity, right? When we're tied in, we're open, we're conversant. These things just kind of pop through naturally.
Yeah.
Often, evidentiary, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like it happened. Like
Yeah.
I don't have an
And we're
explanation for it.
too negligent of calling it out, acknowledging it so we can be aware of it, and we just blow right past it in conversations.
Hmm. Right. We don't pause.
We don't slow down.
Yeah. Yeah. There's beauty all over the place. One of the
Absolutely.
things I talk to people about is going back to that pausing is creating their archive of awesome.
Mm.
Write a list of things that you're proud of. Keep it up to date. So on those days where you wake up and you don't want to put on your big boy pants or your big girl pants, you can pull it back out and scroll through and be like, okay, right. I have done hard things. I've done challenging things. I've been able to learn.
Yeah.
I've beat my consecutive streak for days alive. Like let's go ahead and do this and give it a
Right.
try.
Right. Now, confidence can often be confused as ego, right?
Yes, arrogance. Yeah.
Now, would that depend on the listening audience and how they see themselves?
The difference between ego and confidence.
Yeah, if you got the sage on stage, right?
Hmm.
And so you got listening audience, and depending on where their perspective is when stories are told, it could sound like ego, or it
Hmm.
could sound like confidence. It could, the real I'm locked into this is my experience. I know it to be
Hmm.
true, and I'm delivering it, as opposed to, hey, look at me, see how I've done. You can too. Just
Yeah.
follow my, book or tape or, workshop, whatever.
Well, I think it goes back to perspective. If audience member would have the perspective that, oh, this person is just a snake oil salesman and is just trying to get my money, well, then yeah, it doesn't matter whatever they say.
Hmm.
It's if you're going to have that perspective that this person is just trying to get one over on me, well, yeah, everything's going to sound like a sales pitch and salesy.
Right.
But if now, and conversely, if you're there looking for a messiah, everything they say is going to sound great, and you're going to open your checkbook and probably not do whatever they tell you to do. Like,
Right. Right.
but
Well,
if
it's
you're
like
there, right?
I heard from publishers, and I've greatly truncated my books. My first one was over 1,000 pages. Um, Now that I'm in the mid 40 to 50 category, right? I've
Hmm.
truncated them and got them down to where they're around 100 pages, which is what publishers say today, 60% of get read completely.
Hmm.
And it
Hmm.
goes down from there. So advice to other authors that are out there, if you've got all this stuff and you write like Tom Campbell or you write these, huge volumes, are they ever really going to get read?
Right.
Or are you just processing your own stuff, right, for the cathartic experience?
Yeah. Nothing wrong with
Right.
that.
No,
Yeah.
no, absolutely not. But just keep it in perspective. Are you writing something that you really want to share and get read?
Hmm.
Or are you writing just because you want to say, hey, I did that?
Exactly.
And
Yeah.
I
And
think that's
and that and that comes back to what's the intention around it,
sure. Yeah, if you want to share the information, then make it simple, silly,
right?
right? The old KISS philosophy.
Yes, sir.
And by doing so, they'll Zig Ziglar, right? Help enough people get what they want, you'll get what you want.
Yeah.
And that's the servant leadership. That's the true leadership today
Hmm.
that's necessary. How would you advise, we've expanded our time. It's been just an amazing conversation. I
Oh, thank
really
you.
appreciate your insight, your wisdom, and your brilliance in delivery.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
This has been a lot of fun.
What, yeah, time's short. It doesn't seem like that because it's just flown, right?
Hmm.
As a closing or parting gift, if you will, what might you offer to our audiences the things they might consider on a daily, moment-to-moment basis, if you will, when they begin to feel that friction come up and how to resolve it.
Yeah, that's why I put together a free masterclass called the Navigators, because we can have one of four navigators steering our life, or sometimes a cohort of them, which we talked about. So the Navigators Masterclass, which is johnmollura.com/free stuff, it helps you switch out of autopilot and into awareness. It helps you recognize when you're being judgmental and switch into a mindset of curiosity. So I have 3 questions that they learn in there to switch out of, when you're on autopilot but curious, which I call the drifter. That's the shiny object, navigator, where it's like, oh yeah, squirrel.
Yeah.
Like things are getting tough. Let me just float over here and do something. Then,
Right.
another navigator is the blamer. That's when we're judgmental and on autopilot. The blamer, the world is happening to them, right? Everybody hates me. I might as
Not
well go.
recognize there's 3 fingers pointing back at you, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So it's teaching how to switch out of the drifter, how to switch out of the blamer, and then also the third one, which is the judgmental and aware part of us. That's the critic.
Mm-hmm.
That has noble intentions to keep us safe, but when it gets out of hand, or gets too jaded, or too myopic, what questions can we ask to switch into the fourth navigator, which I call the seeker? That's aware and curious. So that's a free gift to everybody to expand on that concept. I'd love for them to.
They call him the seeker.
Yeah, that's right. The who.
Right. And that's what we ought to be. Not that I want to be prescriptive with that. I think that's our natural state of being.
Yeah. Look at a child.
Yeah, we just forgot. We can't, which seems, a little odd, right? Instead of progressing into some future being, we're just remembering who we really are.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So many people I
That's
work with say, I feel like I'm so far from where I started.
Oh, I'm hip.
Yeah.
Yeah. And beginning life as an orphan and adopted and all that, never feeling disconnected, but having that external or the internal, okay, where's my connections?
Yeah.
Right? For all family, how does that happen?
Mm-hmm.
And then what can I do about it?
There you go. Yep. And then taking action on it, even when we're scared.
Yeah. Yeah. Super. John, this has been phenomenal. I totally
All right. Thanks, man.
appreciate you and what you're doing, and your information will be below in the description, of course. Thanks so much for your time. It's a great honor.
Thank you, Zen. It's been a lot of fun. And again, I'm so grateful for your time and for your audience.
And for your brain.
Amen. All right, brother.
And namaste and in la catch. And thanks for sticking with us for this episode of One World in a New World. For John and myself, I am totally grateful and thankful for your presence. And by all means, do like, subscribe, share, and make a comment. It's what makes the world go round, the communication, the connections that happens from that. And stop by planetarycitizens.net and pick up your free copy of Planetary Citizens, Awakening the Heart of Humanity. So thanks again for showing up, and I'll see you next time.
Okay, bye-bye.
Freedom is such a precious thing. Don't just talk.